You'll never remember the truth, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lucas Steele blinked, staring at the sterile white ceiling above him. The cold sensation of confusion gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. His head pounded, each thought slipping through his fingers like sand. There was a void, an empty space where his memories should have been. The doctors said it was a traumatic brain injury, but how could that explain the one thing he still remembered? Her, Scarlett, the girl who had betrayed him. Why could he remember her face so vividly when he couldn't recall anything else? Every time he closed his eyes, her image haunted him. The way she smiled, the way she looked at him with eyes full of secrets. How could a betrayal cut so deep when he had no recollection of it? His fingers gripped the sheets beneath him, and a strange sense of anger and longing rose within him. What had she done to him? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that he needed to find her, to understand the truth? It was all there, hiding just out of reach, and he could feel it, tugging at him like a magnet, pulling him towards something he wasn't sure he was ready for. As the room swirled around him, the door opened, and in walked a figure he hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. She stood there, a perfect image of calmness, her brown eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath hitch. Scarlett, he rasped, the name slipping from his lips before he could stop it. She froze, her gaze widening for the briefest of moments before her expression smoothed over. Lucas, she said, her voice steady but with a hint of something he couldn't quite place. How are you feeling? He could barely find the words. How could she be here? Wasn't she the one who had left him in the dark, the one who had shattered everything they had? Yet here she was, standing in front of him like she belonged in his life. But did she? His memories were a blur, but he still remembered her face. He remembered the anger that had filled his chest when he'd last seen her. Why do I remember you? He asked, his voice hoarse with frustration. Scarlett took a step forward, her gaze softening, and, for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. I don't know, she said quietly, but I'm sorry, Lucas. I never meant for things to end like this. His heart raced. Sorry. It didn't make sense. He didn't remember anything clearly, but he knew this wasn't the time for apologies. There was something more to this, something that didn't add up. You betrayed me, he said, his words sharp. Scarlett looked down, her lips pressing into a thin line. I didn't have a choice, she whispered, barely audible. I was protecting you. Protecting him? His mind screamed for clarity, but all he could do was stare at her, searching her face for answers. Could he trust her? Could he believe her? The room felt suffocating, the weight of his lost memories and unanswered questions closing in on him. Scarlett reached out, her hand trembling as she gently touched his arm. I'll help you remember, Lucas. I swear. But how could he believe her when everything in his gut screamed that she was the reason he was broken in the first place? He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to. But he didn't know if he could. And somewhere deep inside, he wasn't sure he wanted to. As Scarlett stepped back, her face hardening once again, he felt his resolve strengthen. He would find out the truth, no matter the cost. The silence between them was unbearable. Lucas felt the weight of Scarlett's touch lingering on his arm, but he couldn't bring himself to look at her. The anger he felt was bubbling just beneath the surface, mingling with confusion and a strange longing he couldn't shake. She'd said she was protecting him, but how could he believe that? She had been the one to push him away, the one to hide the truth from him. Protecting me from what? He finally managed to ask, his voice low and filled with distrust. Scarlett hesitated, then stepped back, her eyes avoiding his. From the truth, she whispered, so quietly that Lucas almost didn't hear it. The words hung in the air between them, thick with tension. Protecting him from the truth? He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but he didn't have the strength. He didn't even have the full picture. His memory was a shattered puzzle, and Scarlett was the missing piece he couldn't place. Why do you look at me like that? Scarlett's voice broke through his thoughts. Her eyes were filled with something that almost looked like regret, but Lucas wasn't sure he could trust that look anymore. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His mind was still racing, still searching for the truth. You've changed, he said instead, his tone cold. Scarlett blinked, visibly hurt. I haven't changed, Lucas. I never wanted any of this. But you have no idea what I've been through to keep you safe. I made mistakes, yes, but it wasn't what you think. Lucas shook his head. The more she spoke, the more confused he became. Then why did you leave me? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Scarlett's eyes filled with unshed tears, but she quickly wiped them away. Because I didn't want to lose you. I knew you wouldn't understand. I thought it was better this way, that you would be safer if you didn't remember. The words hit Lucas like a slap. Safer if you didn't remember? The betrayal felt even worse now. So, you kept me in the dark. For my own good. Scarlett nodded, her face softening with a sadness Lucas didn't know how to process. Yes, she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. And now you want me to believe that? Lucas's voice cracked with disbelief. He turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I don't know what to believe. Scarlett stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward him, but Lucas took a step back, shaking his head. No, Scarlett. You don't get to just come back into my life and expect me to forgive you. You've destroyed everything. Her expression faltered, but she didn't give up. Please, Lucas, let me explain. Let me fix this. I never meant to hurt you. Then why does it feel like you've been lying to me this whole time? Scarlett's gaze softened, and she stepped even closer. Because I was, she admitted softly. But not about everything. Lucas's heart skipped a beat, and his mind raced. Not about everything. What did that mean? What are you talking about? He demanded, turning back to face her. Scarlett took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I've kept the biggest secret of all from you, Lucas. The one you've been trying to remember. The truth. About why you were hurt. Why everything changed. His pulse quickened as her words sank in. This was it. The truth was finally within his grasp, but would he be ready for it? Would he ever be able to forgive her for all the lies? The room seemed to grow colder as Scarlett took another step closer. You've been remembering the wrong things, Lucas. The truth is more complicated than you can imagine. She paused, her eyes searching his for some sign of understanding. But Lucas only stared at her, unsure of whether he was ready to hear what she had to say. The silence stretched between them, both of them caught in the web of the past, unsure of how to move forward. What is it, Scarlett? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him, her expression torn between guilt and determination. The truth about what happened to you, Lucas. It's more dangerous than you think. And if we don't face it now, it could destroy both of us. Lucas felt a cold shiver run down his spine as Scarlett's words settled in. It could destroy both of us. He repeated her words in his mind, trying to make sense of what she had just said. He had barely processed the idea that she might have been hiding something so dark and dangerous. But now, with the weight of her gaze on him, he felt the urgency in her voice. What are you talking about, Scarlett? He asked again, his voice more desperate this time, the need for answers clawing at him. Scarlett looked at him, her expression pained as if the truth she was holding back was a burden too heavy to bear. She took a deep breath, as though trying to summon the courage to speak the words that would unravel everything. You think your memory was taken from you, Lucas, she said softly, but it wasn't. You gave it away. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. I gave it away, he repeated, disbelief heavy in his voice. Scarlett nodded slowly. You trusted the wrong people. You trusted me. And then, you made a choice. A choice that erased everything. She paused, biting her lip as if she were trying to hold back more tears. You erased your own memories. To protect yourself, to protect me, but now, I'm the one who has to carry that burden. I've been carrying it alone, trying to keep you safe from the truth. But now it's time for you to know. Lucas could feel the walls closing in on him, the room suddenly too small, too cold. What happened, Scarlett? Tell me everything, he urged, his voice rough with emotion. Scarlett hesitated, looking away for a moment as if searching for the right words. Then she looked back at him, and her eyes were full of something Lucas couldn't place. It was never supposed to be this way, she whispered. You were involved in something bigger than you could ever imagine. The people you trusted, the ones who promised you safety, they lied. They used you. And in the end, you had to choose, them or me. You chose me, and in doing so, you erased the memories of the people who hurt you the most. You protected me, Lucas, even though you had no idea what you were really protecting me from. His mind raced as he tried to piece everything together. The fragments of his memory, the flashes of anger and betrayal, the feelings of loss that had never made sense. Now, they were starting to fall into place. And now, I have to remember, he asked, his voice low. almost a whisper. Scarlett's expression softened. You need to remember, Lucas. Because the people who hurt you, who hurt us, they're not done. They'll come for you again. And you need to be ready. You need to know the truth, the whole truth, before it's too late. The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Lucas felt a chill run through him. He didn't know if he was ready for this, for the truth that Scarlett was offering him, but he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away now, not when the answers he needed were right in front of him. Tell me everything, he said again, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Scarlett nodded, her eyes locking with his. It's not going to be easy, Lucas, but it's the only way you'll ever find peace. He braced himself for what was to come, his mind already racing ahead, but he knew there was no turning back now. The truth was within reach. And no matter how painful it would be, he had to face it. He had to remember. Scarlett took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered the strength to continue. It was never supposed to be this way, Lucas, she said softly. When you were dragged into this world, I tried to protect you, to keep you from the truth. But now, everything is falling apart, and I can't shield you any longer. Lucas looked at her, the weight of her words settling deep inside him. His mind, still clouded by the confusion of lost memories, struggled to piece it all together. He had to know more. What world are you talking about? He asked, his voice firm, but the fear creeping in. Scarlett glanced around, as though making sure no one was listening, before she stepped closer to him. The world of power, manipulation, and lies. The people who you trusted, the ones who made promises, they never had any intention of keeping them. You were part of something much bigger than you ever realized. And when the time came for you to make a choice, you chose me. You chose to forget everything, to erase the pain. Her voice shook with emotion, and Lucas could see the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. He felt a mix of anger and confusion building within him. And now you're telling me that my memories are gone because I erased them to protect you? He said, the words harsh, though they didn't feel right. Scarlett nodded. You erased them to protect us both. You made the choice to forget the people who hurt you, the ones who put you in danger. But it wasn't enough. They're coming for us again, Lucas. And this time, we can't hide from the truth any longer. Lucas took a step back, his mind racing. He had trusted Scarlett. He had believed in her. But now, everything seemed like a lie. So what now? He asked, his voice low, a mix of disbelief and fear. Scarlett reached out, her hand brushing his arm gently. Now, we face it together, she said, her voice steady but filled with a hint of sadness. Now, you remember everything, Lucas. All of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because if you don't, we won't survive what's coming. Lucas felt the weight of her words, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. He had lost so much time, so many memories, but could he handle the truth? Could he handle the consequences of everything he had forgotten? And if I can't handle it, he asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Scarlett's eyes softened, and for a moment, Lucas saw the woman he had once loved, strong, determined, and fearless. You don't have a choice, she replied, her voice firm. You can't keep running, Lucas. You have to face what you've been hiding from, or it will destroy you. It will destroy both of us. Lucas stood there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. The truth, the betrayal, the loss, it was all too much. But as Scarlett's eyes held his, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back. He had to remember. And whatever the truth was, he would have to face it, no matter how much it hurt. He nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. All right, I'll face it. But you have to promise me something, Scarlett. Promise me that when I remember everything, you won't leave. No more lies. No more hiding. Scarlett stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I promise, Lucas. I won't leave. We'll face this together, no matter what happens. The words felt like a lifeline, but even as they hung in the air, Lucas knew the hardest part was yet to come. The truth was waiting, and he had no idea how deep the lies went or how much they would shatter everything he thought he knew. But there was no turning back now. He had to remember, even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant losing her. Lucas stood in the dim light of the apartment, his mind swirling with the gravity of Scarlett's words. He had asked for the truth, but now that it was standing right in front of him, he wasn't sure he was ready to handle it. The weight of his forgotten memories pressed down on him, suffocating him in the silence of the room. Scarlett had promised she wouldn't leave, but the promises of the past had already been shattered, and he wasn't sure how much he could trust her now. "What's the next step?" he asked, his voice rough with uncertainty. Scarlett hesitated, her eyes filled with an emotion Lucas couldn't quite place. "The next step is remembering, Lucas. You have to face everything. Every choice you made. Every person who lied to you. Every sacrifice you never knew you made. It's the only way we'll survive this." Her words lingered in the air, as heavy as the silence that followed. "But what if I can't handle it? What if I can't remember?" Lucas's voice cracked, betraying the fear he had buried for so long. Scarlett reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder, her touch soft but firm. "You will remember, Lucas. I believe in you." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they only made the fear inside him grow. He wasn't sure if he could handle what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't keep running from the past. He had to face it, no matter how painful it would be. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice steadying as he took a deep breath. Scarlett's gaze softened, and for a moment, Lucas saw the woman he had once known. "We have to go back," she said quietly. "Back to where it all started. You have to remember what happened before you lost your memory. Only then can you truly understand why everything changed." The words hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. He knew what she was asking. Going back meant facing everything. The people who had used him, the lies that had been told, the betrayal that had shattered his world. But as much as the idea terrified him, he knew it was the only way. He couldn't keep pretending that his life was normal, that his memory would somehow come back on its own. He had to confront the truth, no matter how much it hurt. "Let's go," he said, his voice calm but resolute. Scarlett nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I'll be with you every step of the way, Lucas. We're in this together." As they walked out of the apartment, the weight of the past seemed to follow them, lingering in the air like a shadow. Lucas didn't know what would happen next or what memories would resurface, but he knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of the end of the lies. It was time to face the truth, even if it meant losing everything he thought he knew. And deep down, a part of him hoped that the truth would finally set him free. Lucas and Scarlett walked through the bustling streets of the city, the sound of footsteps and distant conversations filling the air. The weight of what they were about to do pressed heavily on Lucas's chest. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew that confronting the past was the only way forward. As they neared the location Scarlett had mentioned, Lucas's pulse quickened. His mind was a storm of thoughts, doubts, and memories he couldn't fully grasp. What if the truth was worse than he imagined? What if everything he thought he knew was a lie? Scarlett, sensing his unease, gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're almost there," she said softly. Her voice, though calm, betrayed a hint of anxiety. Lucas glanced at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Are you sure about this? You're asking me to dig up everything I've forgotten, everything I thought I'd moved on from. What if it's too much?" Scarlett stopped walking, her eyes locking with his. "Lucas, I can't make you do this, but I promise you, the truth is the only thing that will set you free. You've carried the burden of forgetting for so long, but you can't keep living in the shadows of your own mind. The past is already a part of you. You have to face it." Her words, though gentle, carried a force that Lucas couldn't ignore. He knew she was right, but the fear of what might resurface still gnawed at him. "I just want to know the truth," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I need to know what happened, what I did, what you did, everything." Scarlett gave him a small smile, her eyes softening. "And you will, Lucas. Everything you need to know is right here, inside you. I'm just here to help you unlock it." With that, they continued their walk in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging between them like a heavy fog. They arrived at a small, inconspicuous building tucked away from the main street. It looked like a place forgotten by time, its cracked windows and faded paint giving it an air of neglect. Lucas felt a knot form in his stomach. This was it, the place where his past would finally be revealed. Scarlett led him inside, her steps sure and steady. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and the air felt thick, as if it had been sealed off from the world for too long. A man stood by a desk in the corner, his back turned to them. He was tall, with dark hair and a serious demeanor that immediately put Lucas on edge. Scarlett approached him first, speaking in low tones that Lucas couldn't quite hear. The man turned, his eyes briefly flicking over to Lucas before he nodded and gestured for them to sit. "You're ready?" he asked, his voice cold and authoritative. Lucas didn't answer immediately. His heart was pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had no choice. He had to know. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes studied him for a moment before he motioned for Scarlett to sit beside him. "The truth is never easy, Lucas. But it's the only way forward." As Lucas sat down, he could feel the weight of the man's words pressing on him, the fear of what was about to unfold clawing at his insides. Scarlett reached over, placing her hand on his, offering him the comfort he didn't know he needed. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're in this together." Lucas squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. As the man began to speak, Lucas braced himself for what was coming. The truth was finally within reach, but was he ready to face it? Would the answers he sought bring him peace, or would they shatter him even more? His mind raced, and in the pit of his stomach, he felt the stirrings of something darker, something he hadn't been prepared for. But there was no turning back now. The truth was waiting, and it was time for him to find it. The man stood across from Lucas, his eyes cold and calculating. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and for a moment, Lucas questioned if he was truly ready to hear the truth. Scarlett's hand remained firmly on his, offering him a sense of comfort amidst the overwhelming uncertainty. "We're in this together," she had said, but Lucas wasn't sure anymore. Could he handle the full weight of what was about to be revealed? The man spoke, breaking the silence, his voice sharp and direct. "Your memory wasn't just taken, Lucas. It was erased, manipulated, and not by anyone you could have ever suspected." Lucas's heart raced, his breath catching in his throat. Erased? Manipulated? The words were like shards of glass being thrust into his mind, cutting through the fog of confusion that had clouded his thoughts. Scarlett had told him the truth would set him free, but this was something else. "Who did this to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Lucas felt the weight of the truth pressing in from all sides. It wasn't a single person, Lucas. It was a web, a network of people who needed you to forget, needed you to stay in the dark. And you did. For a time, you were their pawn. They had a plan, and you were part of it. Lucas's mind spun, the pieces of his life falling into a chaotic blur. He had always trusted people, but now he wasn't sure who had ever been on his side. Scarlett had been the only one to stay by him. But had she been part of the deception too? He turned to her, his eyes searching for any sign of betrayal, but all he saw was the same familiar pain in her gaze. "You knew about this," he said quietly, his voice shaking. Scarlett nodded slowly, her expression full of regret. "I knew, but I didn't know how to tell you. The choices you made, the people you trusted, they put us all in danger. You had to forget, Lucas, so that you could be protected. But it was never supposed to go this far." Lucas's mind reeled, the pieces of his past now slipping into place. The feelings of betrayal, the flashes of anger, the missing time, all of it was part of something bigger, something he had never fully understood. "What exactly did I forget?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Everything," the man answered, his tone cold. "You erased all the connections, the people who used you, and the truth about what you were involved in. But the most important thing you erased was yourself. You lost your identity, your purpose." Lucas's chest tightened as the words sank in. He had lost himself. The past year, maybe more, had been a blur of empty days and half-formed memories, all of it designed to keep him in the dark. The people he had once trusted, the life he had built, all of it had been taken from him. "Who was I?" he asked, the question escaping him before he could stop it. "You were part of something larger than you can understand," the man replied. "But the moment you started questioning things, they made sure you forgot. They erased everything, your family, your allies, even your enemies. Everything that connected you to that world was wiped clean." Lucas stared at the man, trying to process the enormity of what he was hearing. Was it even possible to rebuild from this? Was he too far gone? Scarlett spoke then, her voice soft but resolute. "We can fix this, Lucas. We can find the pieces of your past, bring everything back, but you have to be ready to face it. You have to be ready to see what you were really a part of." Lucas turned to her, her words slowly cutting through the fog of confusion. And what if I'm not ready? What if I can't handle the truth? He asked, the fear evident in his voice. Scarlett's eyes softened, and for the first time since they had entered the room, she reached out and cupped his face. You don't have a choice, Lucas. You have to face it. But I'm here with you. We'll do this together. Her words were a lifeline, and Lucas felt a glimmer of hope stir inside him. The truth might be painful, but it was the only way forward. And with Scarlett by his side, maybe, just maybe, he could begin to piece his life back together. Lucas stood there, his mind still reeling from the truth he had just uncovered. Scarlett's words echoed in his ears, and the weight of the revelation threatened to crush him. You erased everything, the man had said, and for the first time, Lucas understood the magnitude of the choice he had made. He had willingly forgotten his own life, his own identity, to protect the people he cared about. But now, that protection felt like a prison, and the walls were closing in. What now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Scarlett looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. Now, we find the truth, Lucas. All of it. We rebuild what was lost and face the people who tried to tear us apart. She was right. The truth was the only thing that could set him free. But the fear in his chest was overwhelming. How could he face a past he had erased so completely? How do we even start? Lucas asked, his voice strained. Scarlett stepped closer, her presence a grounding force in the storm of emotions inside him. We start by trusting each other, she said, her voice steady. You've already taken the hardest step by remembering, and now we have to keep going. Together. Lucas nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no choice but to trust her. She was the only one who had been there for him, the only one who had never abandoned him. But as they prepared to dive deeper into the truth, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something even darker awaited them. The answers they sought might not be as simple as they hoped. All right, he said, his voice steadying. Let's do it. Scarlett smiled, but it was a small, bittersweet smile. We'll go through everything, piece by piece. We'll find out who did this to you, and why. And we'll make sure they never hurt you again. The determination in her eyes gave him the strength he didn't know he had. The truth was waiting, and they were going to face it, no matter how painful it might be. They didn't have all the answers yet, but together, they would find a way to put the pieces back together. As they walked out of the room, the uncertainty still clung to Lucas like a shadow, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. The truth was within reach, and with Scarlett by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Lucas felt a strange sense of clarity as he and Scarlett left the small, dimly lit room. The fear that had been gnawing at him had not disappeared, but it had faded into the background, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and the truth still felt out of reach, but with Scarlett by his side, he knew he wasn't alone in this. They had a long way to go, but the first step had been taken. So what's next? Lucas asked, trying to steady his breath. Scarlett turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. Next, we find the people who've been pulling the strings. We trace every connection, every person you knew before. We dig until we find out why they wanted you to forget. And when we do, we'll make them pay. Her words were laced with something darker, but Lucas could hear the underlying fear in her voice. She was just as uncertain as he was, but her resolve was stronger. It was clear that the truth was as much a burden for her as it was for him. How do we even begin? Lucas asked. Where do we start? Scarlett paused, her gaze softening. We start with what you remember. Every detail, no matter how small, could be a clue. I'll help you piece it together. They walked together in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Lucas could feel the weight of what was coming. The pieces of his past that had been carefully hidden from him, the memories that he had erased to protect himself. But now he was ready. The questions he had once been too afraid to ask were finally surfacing, and with each step, the fear in his chest seemed to lessen. I remember, Lucas began, his voice faltering as a vague image surfaced in his mind. I remember being somewhere dark. People were talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I think I was hiding. Scarlett stopped and turned to face him, her expression intense. That's good, Lucas. That's a start. What else? Lucas closed his eyes, trying to bring the memory into sharper focus. I remember someone's face. A man. He looked at me like he knew who I was, but I didn't know him. I felt like I was being watched, like I was trapped. Scarlett's hand rested on his arm, grounding him. That's exactly it. You were in danger, Lucas. They knew you were a threat, so they erased your memories. They tried to hide you, keep you in the dark. Lucas's mind swirled with the fragments of his past. Each piece was a puzzle he hadn't been able to solve until now. He couldn't remember the man's face, but the feeling of being trapped, of being watched, was undeniable. He had been part of something much bigger than he had ever realized. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. The weight of his uncertainty creeping back. I don't know if I can handle everything coming back. Scarlett stepped closer, her presence steady and reassuring. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'll help you every step of the way. Together, we'll find the answers. Together, we'll put the pieces back together. Lucas nodded slowly, the fear still present but tempered by a new sense of determination. He wasn't sure what the truth would bring, but he knew he had to face it. There was no turning back now. Scarlett was right. It was time to uncover the past, no matter how dark or painful it might be. With each step, the path ahead became clearer, and for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. He was no longer trapped in the shadows of his own mind. The truth was out there, and with Scarlett by his side, he would find it. Lucas stood in front of the old building, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Scarlett had been right. Every step had led them here, to this place. The air felt thick, the kind of silence that hung between two people before the truth was finally revealed. He could feel the unease crawling up his spine, his heart racing as they approached the door. Scarlett stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm, steadying him. This is it, she said softly, her voice laced with both determination and a hint of fear. Are you ready? Lucas glanced at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt, but found none. She was as ready as she could be. And so was he. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I have to be. Scarlett pushed open the door, the old wood creaking in protest as they entered. The space inside was dark, only a faint light coming from the far corner of the room. The smell of dust and neglect filled the air, and Lucas could feel the weight of the past closing in on him. It was as if this place had been frozen in time, a moment that had been locked away, hidden from the world. As they moved deeper into the room, a figure emerged from the shadows. Lucas's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the face. It was him, the man from his fragmented memories. The one who had been there when everything fell apart. The man's cold, calculating gaze met his, and for a moment, Lucas froze. Lucas, the man said, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. I see you've come to find the truth. Lucas's hands clenched into fists, the anger rising inside him. He had been searching for this moment, searching for answers, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to say. You, Lucas said, his voice low and steady. You erased everything. You made me forget. What? The man stepped forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light. You were a liability, Lucas. Your memories were a threat to everything we built. You were too dangerous to keep around with your memories intact. So, we erased them. We made you forget. Scarlett's grip tightened on Lucas's arm, but she didn't speak. She had known. She had always known. But seeing the man's cold indifference only fueled Lucas's anger. What did you want from me? Lucas asked, his voice sharper now. Why keep me alive? The man chuckled, a cruel sound that made Lucas's skin crawl. You were never meant to be anything more than a tool. We used you for as long as we needed you. Then we wiped your memories to make sure you wouldn't be a problem. It was always part of the plan. Lucas's mind reeled, his thoughts spinning as the truth sank in. He had been a pawn, nothing more than a piece on a board, manipulated by the very people he had trusted. The man stepped closer, his presence almost suffocating. But now that you're here, we have a choice, he continued. You can walk away, forget everything once again, and continue living your life. Or you can remember everything. But be warned, Lucas, the truth comes at a cost. The words hit Lucas like a wave crashing over him. He had never felt more torn in his life. The truth he had been searching for, the truth he thought would set him free, now felt like a trap, a burden too heavy to bear. Scarlett's voice broke through his thoughts, soft but unwavering. You don't have to do this alone, Lucas, she said. We face this together, no matter what it costs. Lucas looked at her, the fear and uncertainty in his eyes slowly being replaced by resolve. He had come this far, and there was no turning back. He would face the truth, no matter how painful it would be. "I choose the truth," Lucas said, his voice firm. The man smiled, a cold, calculating smile, as if he had expected this answer. "Very well," he said. "The truth will set you free, Lucas, but it will also destroy everything you thought you knew. Are you ready for that?" Lucas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready." As the man moved aside, Lucas stepped forward, into the darkness, into the truth he had been searching for. And with Scarlett by his side, he was prepared to face whatever came next. The air inside the room was heavy, thick with the tension of unspoken words. Lucas stood at the threshold, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, the truth will set you free, but it will also destroy everything you thought you knew. Asterisk. Scarlett was beside him, her hand resting on his arm, offering him silent support. He could feel her presence, steady and reassuring. But even that couldn't quell the storm of fear raging inside him. He had made his choice. He had chosen the truth. But now, the weight of what that meant seemed almost unbearable. The man who had been standing in the shadows moved forward, his footsteps echoing through the room as he gestured toward a small desk in the corner. The dim light flickered above them, casting long shadows on the walls. "You've chosen wisely, Lucas," the man said, his voice almost mocking. "But the truth isn't what you think it is. It's far more complicated than you can possibly imagine." Lucas's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly despite his best efforts to remain calm. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a small, leather-bound folder. He held it up for Lucas to see, the weight of it almost tangible. "This is what you've been looking for," he said, his voice dark and ominous. Scarlett stepped closer to Lucas, her eyes narrowing as she watched the man with suspicion. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't respond to her directly. Instead, he placed the folder on the desk, opening it slowly. Inside there were photographs, old photographs of Lucas, his face familiar but distant. There were also files, documents, and maps, pieces of a life that Lucas didn't remember living. He could feel his stomach churn as he looked at them, the fragments of his past slowly beginning to come into focus. His hands shook as he reached for the papers, his mind racing. The man watched him with cold, calculating eyes, like a predator observing its prey. "You were a part of something much bigger than you ever realized," the man continued, his voice low and deliberate. "You were working for us, Lucas. You were our asset, and then you became a threat." Lucas felt a cold wave wash over him as the pieces of his past started to fall into place. He had been used, manipulated, but now, looking at these files, it was clear that he had been more than just a pawn. He had been something more dangerous, something they couldn't afford to let remember. I don't understand," Lucas said, his voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't I remember any of this?" The man smiled, but it was a cruel smile, one that made Lucas's skin crawl. "Because we made sure you wouldn't," he said. "We erased everything that tied you to us, to them, to the life you were living. You were never meant to remember. But now, you have a choice. You can either accept the truth, or you can walk away and live in the lies you've been told." Scarlett stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Lucas," she said, her hand gently touching his arm. "You don't have to do this alone. We can face this together, no matter what." Lucas turned to her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt, but all he saw was unwavering support. He knew then that she wasn't just helping him for the sake of the truth. She was helping him because she believed in him. But as he turned back to the man, the weight of the decision before him pressed down harder than ever. "What happens if I choose to remember?" Lucas asked, his voice steady but filled with fear. The man's smile widened. "You'll have all the answers, Lucas. But you'll also have to face the consequences of your past actions. And once you remember, there's no going back." The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Lucas took a deep breath, his mind swirling with the possibilities. The past he had erased was waiting for him, but was he ready to face it? Was he ready to uncover everything he had lost, and everything he had done? He looked at Scarlett, her hand still resting on his arm, and made his decision. I choose to remember, he said quietly, the words heavy in his chest. The man's gaze flickered with something akin to amusement, but Lucas didn't care. He was done running. It was time to face the truth, no matter what it cost. Scarlett gave him a small, encouraging smile. Then let's do this, she said, her voice full of determination. Lucas nodded, taking one last look at the folder on the desk before he reached for it. The truth was waiting, and he was finally ready to face it. Lucas reached for the folder with trembling hands, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. His fingers brushed against the leather surface, the cool texture sending a chill through his body. The man's words echoed in his mind, reminding him of the choice he had made. You'll have all the answers, Lucas. But you'll also have to face the consequences of your past actions. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he opened the folder. Inside, the photographs and documents seemed to mock him, the past he had tried to bury staring him in the face. He looked down at the first photograph, a younger version of himself, standing with a group of people. His face was unfamiliar, but there was a feeling of recognition deep in his chest. These were the people he had once known, the ones who had been part of his life before everything was erased. What is this? He asked, his voice hoarse. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the room and stood behind Scarlett, his eyes flicking back and forth between her and Lucas. Those are the people you were involved with, Lucas. The ones who used you, manipulated you, and then discarded you when they were done. Lucas felt his stomach twist as the weight of the truth settled in. He had been nothing more than a tool to them, a means to an end. The anger, the betrayal, it all flooded back to him in a rush. Scarlett's hand found his again, grounding him in the chaos of his emotions. You don't have to go through this alone, she whispered. But Lucas knew this was something he had to face. This was his past, his choice to remember. He turned his attention back to the photograph, his eyes tracing the faces of the people around him. They were strangers, but not. He should have known them. He should have remembered. Why did they do this to me? He asked, his voice trembling with frustration. The man's expression softened for a moment, almost pitying, but his tone remained firm. Because you were a threat, Lucas. You were too powerful, too valuable. When you started questioning things, when you realized what they had been doing, they knew you couldn't be allowed to remember. Lucas's head spun. He had been a threat to them. He had been valuable. All these pieces of himself were scattered, and he had no idea how to put them back together. But why didn't you just leave me alone? Why erase everything? He demanded. The man's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Because people like you don't just disappear. You were too valuable, too dangerous to let go. But now, you're nothing more than a shell of who you were. And that's exactly how they wanted you. Lucas's breath hitched as the final piece fell into place. He had been erased, not because he was weak, but because he had been strong. Strong enough to see through the lies, to question the things they had done. Strong enough to be a threat to them. He felt Scarlett's grip tighten on his hand, her presence a constant reminder that he wasn't alone in this. She had always been there, even when he didn't know it. And now, as the pieces of his past fell into place, he realized that the truth wasn't just about remembering. It was about reclaiming who he was. What do I do now? Lucas asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man stared at him for a long moment, the silence heavy between them. Then, he spoke, his words cutting through the air like a blade. Now you decide. You decide if you're going to live in the shadow of what you were, or if you're going to rise up and take back what's yours. But know this, Lucas, there's no turning back. Once you remember, you can never forget. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time since this journey had begun, Lucas realized what he had to do. He wasn't going to let the past define him. He wasn't going to let them win. With Scarlett by his side, he would fight for the truth. And whatever it took, he would reclaim his life. Lucas stood at the edge of a new chapter, the truth now fully in his grasp. He had spent so long living in the dark, trying to piece together the fragments of his past, but now, he was free. The man's words lingered in his mind. Asterisk. Once you remember, you can never forget. Asterisk. It was a promise and a warning, and Lucas knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But he had made his choice. The truth had set him free, and now, it was up to him to decide what to do with it. He turned to Scarlett, her presence a constant source of strength. She had been with him through every step of this journey, and now, As they stood at the crossroads of the future, Lucas knew that they were ready. "What now?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with the weight of everything they had been through. Scarlet smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Now, we build something new," she said. "The past is behind us. We can't change it, but we can decide what to do with what we've learned." Lucas nodded, the sense of clarity washing over him. He had been a pawn, used and manipulated, but now he was in control of his own life. He was no longer defined by the mistakes of others, and he no longer had to live in the shadows of a past he couldn't remember. "Together?" he asked, his voice steady. Scarlet's smile grew wider, and she nodded. Together. As they walked out of the building, Lucas felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. The truth had set him free, and now he was ready to face whatever came next. He had taken back control of his life, and nothing could take that from him. This journey, this search for the truth, wasn't just about uncovering what had been hidden. It was about reclaiming his own identity, his own future. It was a reminder to all of us that no matter what we've been through, no matter how much we've lost, we can always find our way back. We can always rebuild, and we can always move forward. The past may shape us, but it doesn't define us. We all have the power to choose our own path, to take control of our own story, and to fight for the future we want. So, take that first step. Find your truth, reclaim your power, and build a future that's yours to shape.